Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome everybody to the Capital Budget Subcommittee. We're meeting here for the purpose of budget hearings on the capital budget. Just in terms of just an administrative note, it seems like we've had an issue with the sign up. So we think we have all those that are interested in the public testimony. I have all the agencies. But if there's public witnesses that I seem to have skipped over, please flag for me. Also, just for transparency, I thought I would go over the order of the agencies today. That way you all know when you're up. First, we're going to start with the Maryland School for the Deaf. Second is Judiciary. Third is Military Department. Fourth is Maryland State Library Agency. Fifth is Department of Housing. Sixth is Department of Natural Resources. Seventh, Department of Environment. Eighth is Department of Juvenile Services, and ninth is Maryland Environmental Service. So we will start first, as I said, with the Maryland School for the Deaf, and we will start with Ms. Laura Hyde. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, very much. I'm Laura Hyde, presenting the capital analysis for the Maryland School for the Deaf. Starting on page 1 with the Capital Improvement Program, Maryland School for the Deaf receives $12.2 million in fiscal 2026 for the high school residences on the Frederick campus. The Hessian Barracks project also receives $240,000 in funds for the first time in fiscal 2029. Turning to page 2, updates. The Vedditz building, which was first funded in fiscal 2018, is scheduled for completion in calendar 2025. The Columbia Campus Emergency Notification System, which was first funded in fiscal 2020, is on schedule to be completed in May 2025. Turning to page 3, the summary of fiscal 2026 state-owned projects on the Frederick campus high school residences. This project, as initially funded in the fiscal 2024 CIP, involves 3 overlapping phases, with the demolition of 3 buildings and construction of 3 new dormitories. The project uses a construction manager at risk methodology and has had many changes and cost increases. The decision to utilize a what's called CM approach was made early on in the decision process with the initial fiscal 2024 design funding. DLS notes that typically it is best practice to retain a CM as the first contract prior to the solicitation of design. But unfortunately, it appears that an initial design solicitation took place without the services of a CM, and that the CM is currently not scheduled to be hired until July 2025. The bold language on page 5 asks the Department of General Services to brief the committees on the problems encountered with the initial design procurement and address the decision not to procure a CM contract from the outset with the initial fiscal 2024 design authorization. On page 6, in Exhibit 1, is Maryland School for the Deaf's current and projected enrollment for the residential students project. And the summary at the bottom of page 6 involves the Hessian Barracks renovation. DLS recommends concurring with the governor's allowance. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Hyde. Great fiscal analysis. Any questions? Okay. Seeing none, we'll call up the School for the Deaf. Welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. So hello and good afternoon, Chairman Greg Zucker and subcommittee members. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of you this afternoon. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is John Serrano. I serve as superintendent at Maryland School for the Deaf. Joining me today is Miss Ann Miller, who is the school's chief financial officer, as well as the chief operating officer. I want to start off by expressing my sincere appreciation to Ms. Laura Hyde and her team for their hard work in helping develop our legislative analysis for our capital budget. It's much appreciated, and that partnership is extremely valuable. MSD remains committed to improving our facilities on both our Columbia and Frederick campuses to support our school's mission, which is to educate our deaf and hard of hearing students in an environment that fosters both their academic learning as well as their personal growth. Earlier this month, we were very excited to officially launch our Frederick campus dormitory project in collaboration with the Department of General Services, DGS, and the selected architectural firm. Our school community and our students actively were able to participate in brainstorming and design sessions to ensure that the new dorms reflect not only the needs but also the aspirations of those who will ultimately live and learn there. And I have to say, the process was very awe-inspiring and engaging. On a personal note, as superintendent, it was amazing to see the students fully participate in the process because this really gives them ownership of this space. So lots of gratitude for that. We appreciate the continued collaboration with the Department of Budget and Management and DGS on our capital project needs. With that in mind, MSD concurs with the analysis and the recommendations presented. We are happy to answer any questions that you may have, and thank you again for your time and consideration this afternoon.
Thank you. Any questions for the superintendent? All right, thank you. Committee will now turn our attention to the judiciary. Where's Jacob? Is he here? Hey, Jacob. Man, Jacob, if I knew it was you, I would have had, lucky as a judiciary, you'd have been 12th. No, I'm teasing. Go ahead.
I would ask, Mr. Chair, that your personal feelings for me not impact the agency. Seems like a bad career move for me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Jacob Polico for the Department of Legislative Services with the budget analysis for the judiciary's capital budget for fiscal 2026. In fiscal 26, the judiciary has $51.117 million budgeted in the CIP for the new Supreme Court of Maryland building. Additionally, there are 3 other projects which are budgeted for future years, 2 of which have received previous funding that we'll discuss today. On page 2, you'll note an observation about a delay which has impacted the project schedule for the new Supreme Court of Maryland building. There's been a delay in the procurement of the construction services contract, which necessitated a 1-year deferral for the start of construction for the new facility. As a result of the delay, the total cost to complete the project is now estimated at $204.1 million. That's an increase of $11.1 million from last session. The judiciary should brief the committees on the current status of the construction services contract procurement and if the process will be completed in time to avoid additional delays to the start of construction. Below that, you'll see 2 recommended GO bond actions. The first is to reduce $25 million in general obligation bonds for the new Supreme Court of Maryland building, and that's in line with the 1-year deferral. The second is to increase the pre-authorized amount for increase the amount pre-authorized for the 2026 session, which will be for fiscal 2027. That's a $30 million increase. On page 3, we have a breakdown of the project receiving funding this year, which is the new Supreme Court of Maryland building. And that building will house the Supreme Court of Maryland, the Appellate Court of Maryland, the Thurgood Marshall State Law Library, and other judiciary units. It's replacing a facility that was constructed in 1972, which has functionally obsolete mechanical systems, structural issues, and insufficient space for the judiciary's current needs for the units that are housed there. The current building additionally doesn't meet ADA requirements and does not have an effective layout for security. The $51.1 million of general obligation bond funds budgeted for fiscal 2026 replaces $51.1 million in general funds, which were appropriated for the project in fiscal 2024, and those are to be reverted to the general fund. The capital budget bill also pre-authorizes $81.4 million, as I noted, for fiscal 2027 and $25.4 million for fiscal 2028. Due to issues, as I discussed, with the procurement of construction services, the start of construction was delayed from May of this year to May of 2025. This is the second delay in the start of construction, as the 2023 CIP indicated that construction would start in November of 2023. And as I noted, the previously noted delay has resulted in a cost increase of about $11.1 million. The original bid for construction on this project was protested. The Department of General Services decided to move forward with a second solicitation, and they officially canceled the first procurement in October of 2024. The other bidders were notified of the cancellation as is required, and DGS is currently preparing a new procurement solicitation for construction, and they anticipate posting it in May of this year, followed by requesting approval from the Board of Public Works no sooner than October 2025. This process will further delay the start of construction, currently scheduled from May of this year to likely October or November of this year, depending on a successful solicitation. As a result, the amount needed in fiscal 2026 is less than the amount budgeted, especially when factoring in the availability of $32.6 million of state funds which were previously authorized for the project. Accordingly, that's where our recommendation to reduce the amount for this year by $25 million comes from, and the increase in the amount pre-authorized for next session. We also have a few out-year state-owned projects. The first is a new district court for Harford County. That includes the construction of a new facility with on-site parking, access roads, and site improvements in Bel Air. The existing facility doesn't have adequate space for the number of necessary courtrooms or other functions. The judiciary has acquired 3 adjacent parcels, and they're currently negotiating on a 4th parcel. As a result of the addition of the 4th parcel to the project plan, construction is now slated to begin in October 2029, and the project is estimated to be complete in April of 2032, with an estimated cost of $124.5 million, including $16 million, which has already been provided for acquisition costs. And the judiciary should comment on the status of the acquisition negotiations for the 4th parcel for this project. We also have the Washington County District Court renovation and expansion. It's a project that includes the renovation of the existing courthouse in Hagerstown, as well as construction of an addition. The existing structure will receive electrical, security, and HVAC infrastructure improvements. Space is also being added for a 3rd judge and the necessary support services. This project has been on hold for 3 years now, as the contract with the selected architect was terminated. The project now includes a 2nd architect to complete the necessary work. General funds of $5.3 million previously appropriated were inadvertently reverted during the fiscal 2024 closeout. The fiscal 2025 operating budget includes a deficiency appropriation to replace those funds, and a previous pre-authorization of $2.7 million for fiscal 2026 is not included in the capital budget due to the delays in terminating the architect's contract. The capital budget bill pre-authorizes $3 million for fiscal 27, and the total estimated cost of the project is currently $15.3 million. Lastly, we have a new district court for Anne Arundel County. This will be a new courthouse to replace the existing Glen Burnie facility. The current facility has security issues along with HVAC failures, water intrusion, and mold. The project is currently scheduled for initial funding in fiscal 2027. According to the 2025 CIP, the funding for fiscal 2027 will be used to acquire land for the new facility, and that project has a total estimated cost of $117.1 million. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being number 2 instead of number 12 today.
Mr. Polikoff, thank you so much. Great job. Thank you. Any questions for the analyst? Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Judge, come on up. Good to see you all.
Thank you very much. Good to see you too. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the subcommittee, we appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today, and we always appreciate Mr. Polikov's detailed analysis. We have responded in writing. We do accept the recommendations from DLS and really don't have anything else to add to our written submission, but would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Thanks for everything you all are doing. Appreciate it. Any questions?
Thank you.
Have a great day. Committee will now turn our attention to the military department. That's right. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. I am Yashodhara Rai, and I will be presenting the fiscal 26 capital budget analysis for the military department. Cover charts on pages 1 and 2 show that the 5-year CIP includes 7 projects with 2 readiness centers, Glen Burnie and White Oak receiving funding in fiscal 26 and will be discussed in today's presentation. Key observation at the bottom of page 2 highlights that the department's draft interim 10-year facilities master plan was submitted in June 2024. This updated master plan removed the Department of Emergency Management, which is no longer a military department component, and includes the department's capital investment strategies. On page 3, the Havre de Grace Combined Support Maintenance Facility is set to be completed in spring of 2025. The department notes that this project was recompeted for federal fiscal 2025 funding. We request the department to provide status of the federal funding and the possibility of receiving federal reimbursement for the state's share of the project design cost. Starting at the bottom of page 3 through page 6 are the 2 projects programmed in the fiscal 26 CIP. The first one is Glen Burnie Readiness Center that includes $176,000 in GEO bonds and $227,000 in federal funds to begin project design scheduled to start in March of 2025. The total estimated project cost has decreased by about $700,000 due to updated cost estimates. The entire project is anticipated to complete in January 2028, and the department anticipates receiving federal construction funding in federal fiscal 2026. The second project on pages 5 and 6 is the White Oak Readiness Center. This project includes $152,000 in GEO bonds in fiscal 26 to complete project design. This project was previously removed from fiscal 25 to 29 CIP as it did not receive federal funding due to federal budget constraints. But the National Guard Bureau still provided design funds for the project, and the department submitted 35% design in August 2024 to compete for the federal fiscal 26 funding. The department is currently working on the design modifications that the NGB requested and expects to resubmit the revised project design for federal fiscal 27 funding by the June 2025 deadline. The total anticipated project cost has increased by $13.3 million. This is mainly due to the inflation of construction costs. We request the department to comment on the contingency plan if the department fails to secure federal funds in fiscal 27. Pages 6 and 7 describe the 5 out-year projects included in the 5-year CIP. The project that I wanted to highlight here is the Frederick Readiness Center that received its first authorization in fiscal 25 and was also pre-authorized $2.68 million for fiscal 26 in the fiscal 25 capital budget. Due to the project's revised schedule, this project has been removed from the CIP and the pre-authorized amount has been further deferred to fiscal 27. This is included in Section 13 of the fiscal 26 capital budget bill. The other 4 out-year projects have yet to receive their first authorizations. At the bottom of page 7 is an update on the military department's 3 properties being divested. The Catonsville Readiness Center at Baltimore County is scheduled to be presented to BPW for its divestiture determination and will facilitate the construction of a cannabis incubator as required by Chapter 254 of 2023. The divestment of Cade Readiness Center is pending on the availability of another readiness center to transfer the unit currently occupying this readiness center. Page 8 notes that the Annapolis Readiness Center renovation and expansion project has been removed from the 2025 CIP. This is at the department's request because this project has been deferred to fiscal 2031. On the Free State Challenge Academy renovations, Phase 1 of the renovation project is complete. The Phase 2 is currently in BPW approval process and is expected to complete by June 2025. As of January this year, $4.5 million of the project's total funding has been encumbered. On page 9, Exhibit 1 shows the percentage of the state's major Air and Army facilities in fully functional status between fiscal 2020 and 24. The Maryland Air National Guard facilities consistently maintain 100% functionality. The Maryland Army National Guard facility functionality has lowered by 9% in fiscal 24. DLS's recommendation to concur with the governor's allowance for PAYGO federal fund of $227,000 and approved $328,000 in GEO bonds for the 2 readiness centers, including the deferred pre-authorization for the Frederick Readiness Center, are at the top of page 3. This is the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rai. Any questions? Okay. Thank you very much. General, come on up. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Great to have you here. Start whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and the Capital Budget Subcommittee. My name is Major General Janine L. Burkhead, and I'm honored to present the capital budget testimony for the Maryland Military Department. And we thank our DLS analyst, Ms. Rye, and our DBM analyst, Mr. Wardrop, for their help and support in the process. The department submitted written responses to the capital budget analysis to the committee, and my remaining time before you will focus on a few key items. To assist the state in the current budget crisis, the department has revised several project timelines, that being Rural Armory, Glen Burnie, White Oak, and Frederick, and deferred $8.6 million in state funding planning in the FY 25-29 CIP for capital FY 26. The department has divested or are in the process of divesting 2 properties, that is the Cascade Armory in Washington County and Catonsville in Baltimore County. My top capital budget priority is the design and construction of a Joint Forces headquarters at Camp Frederick in Reisterstown. The department asked for $7 million in state funding for design for FY 26. The building will allow the department to have effective command and control of our units in one location instead of 3, being Camp Frederick, Havre de Grace, and the 5th Regiment Armory in Baltimore. The department was asked to respond to the following concerns regarding 2 projects. For the Havre de Grace Combined Service Maintenance Shop, Surface Equipment, and Automotive Maintenance, we are asked to brief the committee on the status of Fiscal 2025 Chief of Staff of the Army unfunded priority list, funding possibilities of receiving federal reimbursement for the state share of the project design cost. Unfortunately, Maryland Army National Guard and the state of Maryland will not receive reimbursement for design cost. In discussion with the National Guard Bureau over the last couple of months, it is clear that the federal fiscal budget is very restricted. Thanks to the General Assembly and the Moore-Miller administration for agreeing to replace the federal funding shortfall for this project. This maintenance facility will serve the Maryland National Guard and ensure the readiness of our equipment to support state emergencies. For the White Oak Readiness Center renovation and expansion, we are asked to brief the committee on the department's contingency plan if the department fails to secure federal funds for the project in fiscal year 2027. First, we will apply for the 2027 Chief of Staff of the Army unfunded priority list. Second, we are in the process of submitting congressional directed spending earmarks in the federal FY 27 budget. This funding strategy will require the active support of the Department of Legislative Services and the Department of Budget and Management to ensure federal funds and GO bonds are available in the capital budget should this project be picked up by the Chief of Staff of the Army unfunded priority list or through congressional directed spending. In conclusion, we concur with our DLS analyst PAYGO recommended actions and the GO bond recommended actions. And I have with me today Colonel Retired Dave Palucci, my Chief of Staff, Mr. Mark Freedy, my Deputy Facilities Manager, and Dr. Linda Weaver, our Chief Financial Officer. And we stand by for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, General. Senator J.B. Jennings.
General, you know I'm going to ask a question. It's a drill weekend. I'm going to get the questions. It's not capital budget related.
Of course.
Any word on the planes?
No word on planes, but I haven't given it up yet. We still have a few things that are pending.
Okay, thanks.
Okay? Yes, sir.
General, and then in terms of the new joint headquarters, is that are all staff going to be protected that are working in the other bases? In terms of if you're moving any staff, you're creating a new headquarters, or is all the staff, if there's any movement, is staff going to be protected?
They'll go with the building.
Okay.
They'll move in their positions. We're not riffing or doing anything movement with jobs. Everybody will go with the building. Yes.
Thank you.
Plus, let me just say for the record, they will still maintain a presence in Baltimore City at the 5th Regiment Armory. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. I know Senator Hayes was interested in that, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Seeing no further questions or comments, thank you very much, General, and your team.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to the Maryland State Library Agency. Ms. Andrade.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. I am Natalia Andrade, here with the Department of Legislative Services to present the fiscal 26 capital allowance for the Maryland State Library Agency. On page 1, you can see that the fiscal 26 budget meets the statutory 7.5 million allocation for library projects, aligning with the 5-year capital improvement program. Unlike previous years, when funding exceeded this mandate, the governor's budget now adheres to the requirement. The fiscal 26 funds support 9 projects across 9 jurisdictions, covering new construction, expansions, renovations, ADA compliance, HVAC replacement, energy efficiency upgrade, security improvement, and technology and youth service spaces. Exhibit 1 on pages 3 to 5 shows library funding in the governor's budget as introduced. The governor's proposed budget includes library project grants ranging from $20,000 to $2.9 million, with a total estimated project cost of $84.6 million, including $12.2 million from prior authorizations. 3 projects have received prior funding, while 6 are newly funded for fiscal 26. Additionally, $20.2 million in future funding requests are anticipated to complete 6 projects. Rather than indicating a need for supplemental funding, this reflects how the program has exceeded its mandate levels in fiscal 24 and fiscal 25. If these future requests proceed, they could consume 90% of planned funding for fiscal 27 through fiscal 29, limiting new project funding. While MSLA has discretion in awarding grants, these commitments create expectations of continued state support, potentially constraining future funding availability. Given the current fiscal climate, MSLA should comment on how it plans to manage funding within the mandate and prioritize new requests without exceeding the program's intended limits. On pages 6 and 7, Exhibit 2 provides an update as of February 2025 on the status of construction and renovation projects funded in fiscal 24. As for fiscal 25, no progress has been made on projects to date. The status of capital grant projects funded in fiscal 24 varies across library systems. Several projects can be completed, while others remain under construction in the design phase or have had funding adjustments. Update number 2 on page 8 discusses the expiration of state share adjustments. Chapter 362 of 2022 temporarily increased the state share for county library capital projects to assist fiscally constrained jurisdiction, but this provision will expire on June 30, 2025. Garrett County was the only jurisdiction eligible, using Allegheny County's lower local match requirement to secure funding under the Public Library Capital Grant Program. This allowed Garrett County to receive funding for multiple years, including a proposed $1.1 million award for the Friendsville branch in fiscal 2026. The Board of Public Works has approved previous grants, and final approval for the fiscal 2026 award is expected before the provision ends. To conclude, DLS recommended action is to approve the general obligation bond authorization for the Public Library Capital Grant Program. And with that, I conclude my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Andrade? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Come on out. Good to see you, Ms. Miller. Everything good? Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you. Well, good afternoon, Chair Zucker, Vice Chair McCrary, and members of the committee. I want to begin by thanking Ms. Andrade for her excellent analysis of our budget, as well as our DBM analyst for capital budget, David Konigsberg. I have with me here today Mary Ramey, who is our grants administrator for the State Library Agency and participates in this process. I want to begin by thanking you on behalf of the entire Maryland library community for your ongoing commitment to development of public library facilities in Maryland. With the proposed funding in our FY26 program and the construction of the Garrett County's Friendsville Library, whose groundbreaking I just received an invitation to today, we will have now done projects in every single one of Maryland's counties. Since this program's creation in 2008, the state's $100 million investment has generated more than $380 million in local matching support. In building a library or any public building in the state, it's a combination of many sources, local dollars, oftentimes private fundraising, but it is the state dollars through this program that are really the catalyst for getting the program off the ground. This program has supported a wide range of projects, from HVAC replacements and new roofs to 21 brand new libraries. I want to thank this subcommittee and the General Assembly for the support of this program thus far, and we can really all be very proud of what it's accomplished. As you'll see from my written testimony, this year's proposed program highlights 9 projects in geographically diverse communities throughout the state. It encompasses infrastructure replacements, renovations and expansions, and I am most excited to share 3 new libraries in growing communities where they have never had a library before. I also want to share some of the challenges which will help me respond to the questions from our DLS analyst about how we're going to manage the program going forward, meeting statewide needs with limited funding. It's a challenge we all share. Every year, we conduct a statewide library facilities assessment in which all 24 Maryland counties project their capital needs, large and small, over the course of the next 5 years. And that's an excellent exercise in helping us to plan and advocate for those needs. The most recent assessment, which was completed at the end of calendar year 2024, indicates that 123 of the 192 public library buildings in Maryland are over 25 years old. And with age comes consequences. The consequences of this aging infrastructure include 20 buildings that need a new roof, 17 facilities that require alterations in order to be in ADA compliance, 53 libraries that have HVAC systems that are at the end of their useful life, 50 buildings that require technological upgrades in order to provide everything from high-speed internet access to plugins. 69 existing facilities require general renovation at an estimated cost of about $133 million, and 18 buildings have been identified for replacement altogether at a cost of $495 million. This doesn't include any of the critical improvements that are needed in Baltimore City, the $337.5 million that's needed to address all of the repairs within the Enoch Pratt Free Library System as outlined in the 2024 Joint Chairman's Report. We recently received letters of intent for the FY27 capital grant cycle, and in total, they already exceed $21 million, which is about 3 times the size of what we have to offer. This isn't a new trend. Consistently, and especially since the pandemic, requests have exceeded the program's funding level. We're extremely grateful to the General Assembly for increasing the funding mandate for the program from $5 million to $7.5 million in FY23, which has really helped us to keep up with construction escalation increases. However, future funding requests for these urgent and necessary projects are going to continue to exceed the mandated amount because the statewide need for library facilities improvements and development, as I shared, is tremendous. To address this, we've worked with DBM and the legislature to request additional program funds through the supplemental budget, and we've been successful with that in years where there was supplemental funding available. Of course, this is not one of those years, we understand. We've worked within the program itself and its competitive grant review process to make sure that funds are distributed equitably throughout the state to projects that are going to have the greatest impact on all of Maryland's citizens. Our only alternative is to hold off on funding projects, but this approach only proves more costly in the long run. As the new state librarian coming in this June, I've had some very generative conversations at the federal level around creating designated federal funding to bring to our state's libraries facilities projects. And I've had especially great conversations with Secretary Day and his team at the Department of Housing and Community Development to explore how we might work together to bring funding to projects where libraries are co-located with other community resources like housing. And we have some great examples of that happening right now in Baltimore City. But at the end of the day, it's a future increase in the state mandate that is aligned with the construction needs that's going to be necessary for the agency to accommodate all of the requests throughout the state. But this is not the year for that conversation, I understand. This is one of the most valuable and impactful programs that our agency delivers to the counties. The 21 new libraries I mentioned, including the new library that I oversaw in Cecil County when I was the director there, would not be standing without this program. With your ongoing support for the FY26 program, and hopefully as the state's fiscal outlook improves in future years, Maryland libraries can remain responsive to community needs and thrive in safe, modern facilities that meet the multitude of needs that our communities bring to us. Thank you very much, and at this time I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions? I don't see any. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Committee will now turn our attention to the Department of Housing and Community Development. Scott, why don't you come on up and start whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Today I'll be presenting the capital analysis for the Department of Housing and Community Development. The fiscal 2026 proposed capital budget totals $389.3 million across 15 different programs. The Department of Housing and Community Development, or DHCD, uses its capital funding to create and preserve affordable rental housing, promote home ownership, improve energy efficiency for low-income households, and provide financial assistance for business and community development projects. You can see in Exhibit 1 on page 6 the proposed fiscal 2026 funding by category, with programs dedicated to community development occupying 33% of the budget, and rental housing and shelter programs comprising of 32%. You can see in Exhibit 2 on page 7, DHCD's capital budget decreases by 29% in fiscal 2026 compared to fiscal 2025, with significant changes including a increase of $18.1 million, or 47%, to housing and building energy programs. The fiscal 2026 budget also includes a $27 million increase of $6.4 million for the Baltimore Regional Neighborhood Initiative, or BRNI. The National Capital Strategic Economic Development Program, or NED, decreases by $7 million, or 37%, to $12 million, while broadband programs have experienced an expiration of federal funds, which explains almost all of the funding difference between fiscal 2025 and 2026, as $172.7 million was reserved for broadband programs in fiscal 2025. There's a new mandate in fiscal 2026. The Baltimore Vacants Reinvestment Initiative, or BVRI, formerly known as Project CORE, provides grant funding through public and nonprofit organizations to address vacant properties in Baltimore City. As mandated, the governor is required to include $50 million in pay-as-you-go or pay-go general funds in the fiscal 2026 budget for BVRI. The Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act of 2025 includes a provision that would remove restrictions and authorize the governor to include $50 million for the continuing the core partnership fund in either the capital or operating budget. I'll be moving on to discuss a few other relevant topics, with the first being the Housing Innovation Fund. Chapter 212 of 2024 established the Housing Innovation Fund, with the purpose being to support the Housing Innovation Pilot Program. Chapter 212 also authorized the governor to include an appropriation of $5 million to the new fund in fiscal 2025. The final fiscal 2025 capital budget include language restricting the use of $10 million from the rental housing program for the purpose of implementing Chapter 212. For fiscal 2025, an allocation to the fund must be committed to projects before July 1st, 2026, subject to applicants being afforded a reasonable period of time to complete the application. While for fiscal 2026 and annually thereafter, an allocation to the fund in a fiscal year must be committed to projects before the end of that fiscal year. The next topic involves the State Small Business Credit Initiative, or SSBCI. This funds state programs that expand access to capital for small and underserved businesses. The American Rescue Plan Act provided a total of $198.4 million to Maryland for the SSBCI, including $20.7 million set aside for businesses owned by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, and $11 million that will become available to the state once Maryland achieves performance standards relating to assisting these businesses. While DHCD is the lead agency for the state's SSBCI funding, the funding is also deployed through programs at the Department of Commerce and the Maryland Technology Development Corporation, as you can see in Exhibit 3. As of February 2025, DHCD, Commerce, and the Technology Development Corporation have awarded a combined total of $41.1 million in SSBCI funds. The next topic to discuss is the Business Facade Improvement Program. This was established by Chapter 437 of 2023 in order to provide grants to political subdivisions and community development organizations. Grants are used to improve the outside appearance of businesses or other facilities. This program was separated from the Division of Neighborhood Revitalization, and in fiscal 2022, DHCD had reported that the Division of Neighborhood Revitalization had provided between $3 and $4 million in facade improvement annually through programs such as the Community Legacy Program, as well as Bernie. The next topic is the Downtown Partnership of Baltimore. This is a nonprofit corporation that works with businesses and government to identify needs and to shape policy to strengthen Baltimore City. Over fiscal 2024 and 2025, the state had provided the Downtown Partnership of Baltimore with $23.5 million in direct funding through DHCD. This special funding arrangement was scheduled to end in fiscal 2025. And as agreed, no funding has been provided in the fiscal 2026 budget for this purpose. But the Downtown Partnership of Baltimore has indicated that it is using $7 million of state funds for the construction of a strategic operations center. The fiscal 2026 budget provides an additional $5 million in GO bonds for the center through a miscellaneous grant. Moving on to observations. The first observation is rental housing funding decreasing. So rental housing programs are used to rehabilitate and create new affordable housing for low to moderate income individuals, families, and elderly residents or special needs populations. You can see in Exhibit 4 on page 13, funding for rental housing programs has increased significantly over the past several years, while funding for fiscal 2026 totals $113.5 million, which is a 3% decrease from fiscal 2025. Rental housing programs still have $33 million in unencumbered funds from fiscal 2021 to 2023, with $81.4 million yet to be expended. The largest component of DHCD's rental housing program is Rental Housing Works, or RHW, which receives $85 million in GO bonds in the fiscal 2026 allowance. RHW provides loans to both nonprofit and for-profit developers for different projects. And you can see in Exhibit 5 on page 15, the funding provided through RHW by county since calendar 2012, as well as the current pipeline for upcoming RHW projects. The RHW pipeline exceeds $280 million for projects to create or rehabilitate more than 10,000 housing units. The National Low Income Housing Coalition has estimated a shortfall in Maryland of more than 134,000 units affordable for households below 30% of the AMI, based on the 2022 data from the American Community Survey. The Strategic Demolition Fund provides grants for demolition, land assembly, housing development, or redevelopment with revitalization projects. And you can see in Exhibit 6 on page 16, the total vacant building notices over time in Baltimore City, as well as the number of new vacant building notices, demolitions, rehabilitated vacant buildings. Total vacant building notices have declined by 22% between calendar 2016 and 2024, with more than 3,600 demolitions and 9,900 rehabilitations taking place over that period. Regarding Bernie provides a grant to fund revitalization in sustainable community areas, and funding is mandated at $12 million annually, while the fiscal 2026 budget includes $27 million in GO bonds, and the CIP plans $27 million annually. Moving on to the next observation, broadband. Chapter 74 of 2021 had renamed the Office of Rural Broadband in DHCD to the Office of Statewide Broadband and expanded its responsibilities to include developing a statewide broadband plan, collecting and publishing data on broadband availability and speed, as well as furthering digital inclusion efforts. Exhibit 7 on page 17 shows funding from all sources appropriated for broadband programs across DHCD's operating and capital budgets through the fiscal 2026 allowance, totaling more than $710 million. The capital component includes $267.7 million of federal funds from the IIJA. $95 million was received in fiscal 2024, and $172.7 million in fiscal 2025. Exhibit 8 on page 18 shows the funding awarded or expended under each capital project, as well as the remaining allocated funds between fiscal 2021 and 2026. And those projects include the Broadband IIJA Capital Project, local government infrastructure financing, broadband connectiveness, network infrastructure, and municipal broadband. And the final observation regards legislative reservations. The fiscal 2025 capital budget saw funds provided to projects in the form of GO bonds being taken and reserved for certain purposes. You can see in Exhibit 9 on page 19, the fiscal 2025 budget seeing several of DHCD's capital programs having funds restricted for uses specifically established in Chapter 720 of 2024. Out of $69.5 million in GO bonds, the fiscal 2025 capital budget for Bernie, Ned, and the Strategic Demolition Fund, about $26.5 million, or 38% were reserved for a specific purpose in fiscal 2025. Some other performance measures and outputs. Homeownership programs. One of DHCD's main objectives is to help low and moderate income residents purchase homes. Exhibit 10 on page 20 shows activity in the programs increasing substantially between fiscal 2015 and 2024, while bond issuances. So in addition to DHCD's array of budgeted programs, the department also includes the Community Development Administration, or CDA, which issues non-tax supported debt with the goal of increasing the supply of affordable housing within the state. CDA's issued $1.5 billion in single-family, multifamily, and local government infrastructure bonds in calendar 2024, a decrease from the record high of $1.6 billion in calendar 2023. And with that, we move to the recommended actions. The first for PAYGO is DLS recommends deleting $50 million in general funds for the Baltimore Vacancy Reinvestment Initiative. And the GO bond recommendations include 3 items. DLS recommends funding the Baltimore Regional Neighborhood Initiative, or Bernie, at mandated levels, eliminating funding for the Business Facade Improvement Program, and authorizing the C Community Development Anchor Institution Fund to fund the Downtown Partnership of Baltimore Strategic Operations Center. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benson, for that great analysis. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Secretary, come on up. Secretary Day.
Good afternoon, Chair Zucker, Vice Chair McCray, ladies and gentlemen. For the record, my name is Jake Day. I'm the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development. I'm joined to my left by Carol Gilbert, Assistant Secretary of Neighborhood Revitalization in the department, and to her left, Assistant Secretary Greg Hare, who oversees the Community Development Administration within the department. We're all happy to answer any questions that you have. I want to express my gratitude for the Department of Legislative Services and to Scott Benson, our analyst, for their diligent work and thorough analysis. Governor Moore has introduced a common sense budget, and that budget is guided by a commitment to growth and a dedication to helping Maryland emerge from one of the toughest fiscal times in our state's history. In partnership with other agencies and with the administration and the General Assembly, the department's been working round the clock hard to make Maryland a more affordable place to live while also being laser focused on that economic growth that strengthens communities across the state. And that's why I want to highlight a few of our responses to the recommendations regarding our critical economic development programs that the governor's proposed funding at sustainable levels. First, we agree with DLS's recommendation to swap $50 million in general funds for BVRI, the Baltimore Vacancy Reinvestment Initiative, under the Strategic Demolition Fund with general obligation bonds. In response to DLS's recommendation to reduce the $27 million allowance for the Baltimore Regional Neighborhoods Initiative by $15 million, DHCD respectfully disagrees. A $15 million additional investment doesn't just stay in one jurisdiction, it ripples around the state. Just to give you a sense of what that amount represents, that's $121 million in additional economic impact and returns of $5 million in direct state and local tax revenues. Next, we respectfully disagree with DLS's recommendation to eliminate funding for the Business Facade Improvement Program. DLS's suggestion that the facade improvements be handled through other programs overlooks the core purpose of that program's establishment. The Facade Improvement Program is a vital complement to DHCD's revitalization toolkit, allowing larger programs like Community Legacy, Bernie, and NED to focus on more expansive interventions within the jurisdictions that can apply for those funds. We even changed the program last year to allow community development organizations to apply to ease burden on counties without municipalities like Baltimore County. Returning to the old system would revert to a more oversubscribed, underdeveloped revitalization strategy and would abandon significant progress that has been made in expanding our well-rounded suite of resources. MFIP transforms vacant storefronts, vacant facades into revenue-generating assets all across the state. Just to give you a sense, last year, that $5 million in MFIP supported 426 facade improvements around the state, directly enhancing business districts, attracting new businesses, and increasing tax revenue. Lastly, we respectfully disagree with the recommendation to fund the Downtown Partnership of Baltimore Strategic Operations Center through the SEED program. The department is supportive of this project, as has been evidenced by past investments, and we continue to be supportive of this project as funded in the governor's proposed budget. However, we respectfully disagree that SEED or any other state revitalization program is an appropriate source of funding for the project. A project of this size and scale deserves budget consideration, just not at the expense of SEED or any other state revitalization program. The proven most effective way to deploy limited state dollars into community projects is through a competitive review process where the department and other agencies objectively assess a project's need, impact, and readiness to proceed. The $5 million is out of scale and inappropriate for the program that's become a key statewide tool for forging mutually beneficial partnerships between anchor institutions and their surrounding communities. DLS's recommendation would effectively cut in half the SEED budget, limiting its ability to address high-demand projects statewide. Demand for SEED funding greatly exceeds available funds. In FY25, DHCD received $40 million in requests statewide for the $10 million available. Last fiscal year, the average SEED award was $420,000. Reducing SEED funding to $5 million would come at an opportunity cost with a price tag of $40.5 million in economic impact that would be lost and not realized. In a fiscally tight year, the governor's prioritized strategic investments with high returns and entrusted our department with these programs to achieve just that, because you can't reap what you don't sow. Our written testimony provides additional information on our program's impact, and Assistant Secretaries Hare and Gilbert and I are happy to answer any questions that the committee has. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the department? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you so much.
Colleagues, we'll now turn our attention to the Department of Natural Resources. Mr. Gray. And then I know I made an announcement in the beginning. For some reason, our computers went down. So if there are people that signed up to testify publicly, public witnesses, after an agency has spoken, just flag it for me because we may have not. Is that for Department of Housing?
Yes.
Okay, then come on out. Sorry, Mr. Gray, do you mind? You just want to give your name, organization, and we're going to set the timer for 2 minutes. And I'm glad I said something, so thank you. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Start in any order you wish.
Right under this end. Dana, you want to start?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Senators. I'm Dana Johnson, and I'm here today in support of the DHCD Rental Housing Programs budget. I'm the President and CEO of Homes for America. We are a nonprofit housing organization headquartered here in Annapolis with a mission to build and preserve quality, affordable housing enhanced with services. We have developed over 80 rental communities and currently serve over roughly 5,000 households, the majority of which are here in Maryland. Building and preserving quality rental homes that support seniors, essential workers, and persons with disabilities takes many partners. Here in Maryland, DHCD is a critical partner. We strongly urge you to support the proposed DHCD budget in full. As you all know, the state is in the midst of a housing crisis. The lack of affordable housing options impacts the lives of Marylanders in every part of the state. It also hinders Maryland's economic growth. As the Comptroller's State of the Economy report highlighted, our state's high cost of living and high housing costs in particular are contributing to the decline in the labor force and is dragging down economic growth. Investment in housing is not just the right thing to do for low and moderate income residents, but is also critical to our future. Homes for America has pipeline projects in Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Anne Arundel County, and Wycomico County, all of which depend on state funding to move forward. These projects include both new construction and renovations to existing properties. Rental Housing Works is a particularly important resource for preservation projects. Preservation of existing projects is a critical need nationally and here in Maryland. If properties can't get new investment, we will lose these assets due to physical deterioration, which will further exacerbate the housing crisis. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Mansour Abdul Malik. I'm the Senior Vice President of Development for the NHP Foundation, and I'm here to strongly advocate for the full approval of DHCD's budget. My colleagues will talk about very specific instances about housing helps, not just families, but also economic growth. I want to put a little bit of an analogy in everyone's mind. Housing requires continued maintenance, just like a car. In this instance, we repair our cars, we put gas in our cars, but our cars are also essential to our survival. They allow us to get to work in order for us to be able to earn money, in order for us to be able to take care of our kids, take care of our families, our homes. Housing is the same way. We need to continue to make this investment in our housing stock in the state of Maryland for us to continue to be able to make the necessarily benefits to those that we love and care about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A special shout out to the Vice Chair and other members of the Senate. Thank you for your participation in the committee here. My name is Willie Moore. I'm a member of the Board of Directors and Executive Committee of Maryland Affordable Housing Coalition, and I'm also president of Southway Builders. Southway's first project was in 1991, and it happened to have been a LIHTC deal, low-income housing tax credit. Every year since, in our 34 years of business, we've done LIHTC deals, and we've done over 10,000 units of affordable rental and for sale units. As our governor has so rightly noted, our current fiscal woes for the state need to be solved by growth. And housing is one of the primary issues that is hindering the state's ability to grow. We currently have a need for over 130,000 units of affordable housing. With DHCD's current request through Rental Housing Works for $85 million, that will facilitate between 24 and 25 projects, with an average of about 115 units per project for a total of approximately 3,000 units. Number one reason why projects don't advance is because costs are too high. Since COVID, construction costs have skyrocketed. The most valuable tool to bridge those cost gaps is through Rental Housing Works dollars. At an average of 377 jobs per project, the 24 projects that Rental Housing Works will fund will represent 9,500 jobs. Greatest thing about that is almost all those jobs are in-state resident workers. And lastly, my favorite stat or issue here, benefit, is that unlike most other departments in the state, these are leveraged dollars. Every dollar that is invested by the state gets $11 of private investment that comes into it. The other wonderful piece about this is that's offered through the 4% and 9% tax credits, but sorry, thank you very much. Sorry for running over time, but thank you all. Please support the
It's okay.
Secretary's
Just so you know, the vice chair leaned over me and said, "Can you give this guy 20 minutes?" I'm like, "No, Mr. Vice Chair." But I heard you. I heard you. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Zucker, Vice Chair McCray, and honorable members of the subcommittee. My name is Milana Vayner, and I'm the Chief of Policy and Strategic Initiatives at Baltimore County DHCD. I am also a member of the Maryland Affordable Housing Coalition Board as the local government representative. I'm here today to testify in support of the proposed DHCD capital budget and implore you, despite the many competing budget priorities before you, to maintain it as is. Creation of housing across all income bands is critical to economic growth and community vitality. I won't rehash all the many costs that have skyrocketed over the last 4 years, making it increasingly difficult for projects to pencil. Money just doesn't go as far as it used to. However, it is especially dire for the families who seek better opportunities for themselves and their children. Study after study has proven that where a child grows up determines their long-term outcomes, their success as an adult, and their future earning power, more than any other external factor. Creating affordability in housing is an economic decision as much as it is a values decision. Yet, in Baltimore County, to afford a modest two-bedroom apartment, which costs a little under $2,000 a month, a family has to earn over $37 an hour, nearly $78,000 a year. How can families save enough to buy a home when they can barely afford rent? There are over 50 LIHTC projects in service in Baltimore County, totaling over 4,700 units. Over the years, some of these projects have been the beneficiaries of various grants and programs, including strategic demolition and rental housing works, making them feasible. This doesn't include 4 others in the pipeline, creating or preserving 373 units that haven't yet closed and will be at risk if funding isn't maintained. We cannot build the future we all wish for our residents and their families without this funding. There are difficult budget decisions ahead, but cutting this capital budget during an unprecedented housing affordability crisis will only exacerbate it. Thank you.
Chair, members of the committee, my name is Tom Aid. I'm the CEO of Green Street Housing out of Salisbury, Maryland. We're an affordable housing developer. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of full funding for DHCD's rental housing programs. Green Street relies on these programs to develop and rehabilitate high-quality affordable housing for Maryland residents. Through DHCD funding, we've been able to construct and rehabilitate vital housing projects across the state. Right now, our pipeline of projects under development and under construction includes 16 projects across Queen Anne's, St. Mary's, Wycomico, Dorchester, Caroline, Anne Arundel, Calvert, Prince George's, Washington, and Montgomery counties, bringing more than 1,000 units of much-needed affordable housing to these communities. In recent years, we've also completed projects in Somerset, Cecil, Kent, and Harford counties. Every one of these projects depends on DHCD's rental housing programs. These investments are more than housing. They create jobs, generate tax revenue, and leverage private investment to maximize the state's impact. Without full funding for these programs, projects like ours, which provide safe and affordable housing for working families, seniors, and vulnerable populations, would not be possible. I urge you to fully fund DHCD's rental housing program so that we can continue this essential work. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Richard Green, and I'm here representing the Maryland Mortgage Bankers and Brokers Association. Our membership is comprised of banks, independent mortgage bankers, credit unions, and mortgage brokers. We are really where the rubber meets the road, along with the realtor community, in identifying low to moderate income borrowers who desire home ownership. That home ownership ultimately builds generational wealth, and it builds strong communities. It provides down payment and closing cost assistance otherwise not available to have these buyers enter the housing market. The programs also are available to eliminate student debt and assist disabled folks in making modifications to their homes so they can live there. Otherwise, they wouldn't have that opportunity. The department has many other initiatives that, if adequately funded, will address the shortage of housing in Maryland that is at a critical level, absolutely critical level. And we are here in support of fully funding the needs of the Department of Housing and Community Development so that these wonderful programs can continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, followed by Senator Hellman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to lift up, it's always good to see my comrades that are consistently in the trenches with me, sleeves rolled up, doing the tough work. Willie, Mansour, Dana. But Mansour, I think that it's a young man that I've been fortunate enough to hear about but never meet in this crowd that's trudging through these hearings. I'm not sure if that's your football son, but I also wanted to lift him up because he's out here with us in the trenches. Thank you again.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Hellman.
I would just wanted to echo the Vice Chair's comments. I know Dana, Mansour, and Milana, and I'm just thank you for being here. I know this is hard work. We talk a lot about the need for more housing. I was just in another committee today talking about it, and so you guys are in the trenches doing the work, and so thank you.
Ditto. Thank you very much. Any other questions for this panel? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Again, we had our computer system go down, so if there's anyone else that intended to publicly testify, please come up now. Welcome.
Wow.
Welcome.
Okay. Good afternoon, members of the Capital Subcommittee. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm here to speak in favor of the capital budget for the Department of Housing and Community Development. My name is Claudia Wilson-Randall. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Development Network of Maryland. We are a statewide network of affordable housing developers, housing counseling agencies, community-based nonprofits, and partners across the state who are working hard to make their communities better and build abundant opportunities for people and their families. Our partners across the state work on both people and place. They are doing a variety of projects. The first panel, you heard a lot about housing, but I just want to take a little bit of time to focus on some of the other things that have been mentioned about the budget. First of all, I just want to concur with the department about the need for the business facade improvement program and also for the SEED program to be left intact. That program provides vital interdisciplinary investments with anchor institutions and community development partners across the state. I also just have 3 points I want to make about the budget. One is just the need for operating dollars in order to move capital funds. So the $27 million that has been proposed by the governor for the Baltimore Regional Neighborhood Initiative, or Bernie, needs to have a correspondent $2.7 million in operating funds. And the NED program at $12 million should have $1.2 million in operating funds. It is critical that our partners have the ability to have operating funds in order to move the capital. Without operating dollars, they simply cannot move those capital dollars. The other point I just want to make is that there is a continuing need for rental housing production and rental housing works, as the previous panel mentioned. We're going to need a sustained commitment to rental housing production. And finally, I just want to flag the need for foreclosure prevention. You have my written testimony, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anybody else that we may have missed? All right. Mr. Gray, Department of Natural Resources. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Gray. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll now present the Maryland Department of Natural Resources Fiscal 2026 Capital Budget Analysis. On page 1, you see there are 11 programs in the CIP, only 9 of which are being funded in fiscal 2026. The critical maintenance program is not receiving any money because it has sufficient money coming through the Park System Critical Maintenance Fund. It's passed by the Great Maryland Outdoors Act a couple of years ago. And there's no funding for the Maryland Groundwater Monitoring Network because it's receiving first-time funding in the CIP in 2030. Moving now to the recommendations on pages 2 and 3 to concur with the governor's allowance and authorizations, which I should probably just stop talking, but I'll keep going anyway. Exhibit 1 on page 4 talks about, or shows the Department of Natural Resources capital program funding as it changes over the years. And largely what this is reflecting is the revenues from the transfer tax, the estimate going up. So how does the transfer tax look like? Exhibit 2 on page 5 shows the difference between fiscal 2025 and fiscal 2026. There's about $13.5 million difference in the revenue, but really it's the underattainment from prior years, so 2 years prior, that's impacting fiscal 2026. And that means that it's going to be $13.1 million less than available for programs. Exhibit 4 on page 7 shows the big picture in terms of the changes for the different programs, largely due to the transfer tax going down once again. Some of the BRFA provisions, or Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act provisions, that are kind of impacting the DNR's capital program in some way, are noted on page 8. First one there is the program open space balance being used for the Maryland Park Service operating expenses. It's also the Waterway Improvement Fund is being increased the amount of money that can be used for Natural Resources Police from $2 million to $2.1 million. And the critical maintenance funding that is being transferred from the dedicated purpose account. A couple of years ago, $25 million was put into the account, then $11 million was transferred out, and, well, excuse me, $14 million was transferred out. Now the additional $11 million, so there'll be no money in the dedicated purpose account for critical maintenance. Just to highlight a couple things and 2 programs. The first one is about the Waterway Improvement Fund, or program. On page 8, we'd just like to have the agency comment on which project in its fiscal 2026 project list for the Waterway Improvement Program is being funded as part of the Whole Watershed Act. That was chapters 558 and 559 of 2024, established that Whole Watershed Fund and partnership. And then in terms of the Oyster Restoration Program, I'd like to discuss on pages 20 and 21 some of the changes that are going on there in terms of how is the DNR going to deal with the potential loss of federal funds for the work they're going to be doing for oyster restoration in their sanctuaries are kind of moving forward, because the DNR is moving forward with additional sanctuaries it's going to do oyster restoration work in. However, obviously there's a lot of flux at the federal level, so we've asked the agency to comment on that. There's also a point here about the oyster spat production and oyster substrate procurement. So that's one of the main considerations for oysters. You actually have to have a hard surface to place the oyster spat on. The question is, do we have sufficient oyster spat kind of substrate for that purpose? And what is the kind of plan going forward for the oyster, the sanctuaries we're hoping to restore? And then final comment here regards the long-term plan for oyster spat production in general. All right, and then moving on now, talk about the one issue in the analysis. This is the slow implementation of the Great Maryland Outdoors Act. So once again, it was passed Chapter 39 of 2022. A number of provisions are noted here on this page and the following page that show that there's a sort of, in some areas it hasn't been as much progress as we'd like to see. So we've asked on the next page for the agency to comment on the status of the next steps for completing these components of the Great Maryland Outdoors Act, and on what deadlines the General Assembly can hold DNR to account. Unless there are any questions, that concludes the analysis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gray. Any questions for the analyst? Thank you for that great fiscal analysis. We'll call up the department. Mr. Secretary, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Secretary Kurtz, start whenever you wish.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the subcommittee. For the record, Josh Kurtz, Secretary of the Department of Natural Resources. I'm joined today by my colleague, the Deputy Director of Fiscal Administrative Services, Ryan Collins, for any technical questions. I want to start by thanking Mr. Gray for the detailed analysis and for the opportunity to talk to you all today about our capital budget. I think it's really important to note for the Department of Natural Resources, the bulk of our work is done through the capital budget. These are the funds that go to planting trees. These are the funds that go into rebuilding wetlands. These are the funds that go to paving the parking lot in the state park that is most important to your constituents. These are funds that we issue in grants to a multitude of different organizations, whether that be community-based organizations, nonprofits, academia, to ensure that we're providing equitable and high-quality access to all of our natural resources across the state of Maryland for a multitude of reasons. One of those being economics. When you look at the outdoor recreation economy here in the state of Maryland, we're almost to $9 billion. That's a 12% increase year over year. And we're really excited about a couple of new acquisitions that are going to allow us to continue to grow that. One of those is, frankly, a new model for us in terms of acquiring a property that has a dedicated fund source to it, and that dedicated fund source being a constituency, which was the former Savage River Lodge, now the Savage Highlands State Park. When we, in looking at the responses, I did provide written comments to you all. There were a couple I wanted to highlight. The first being oysters. As was discussed by Mr. Gray, the St. Mary's is the only river that we haven't finalized the post-construction monitoring on. We have the data, and what we're seeing is we've met 11 of the 12 previously identified goals. So just like the other 4, to make the big 5 as they're called, they're all very, very successful. When we're looking at expanding that sanctuary program, what we're not actually doing is expanding the program. We're investing in existing sanctuaries to ensure that they're meeting the goals of that program, which is to support oyster industry, aquaculture, and the restoration of oysters in the bay. And one of the places that we're most excited about was a permit that was issued last year to actually bring in West Coast shell. This is a waste product in the western part of the United States. No biosecurity issues here, all just shell, no biological material. But this is significantly cutting costs for our oyster growers and our watermen to be able to put this shell onto the bottom. So when we look at our opportunities, the federal funding is of great concern. We've had conversations with NOAA. We are kind of in that fluctuation of freeze, unfreeze, freeze, unfreeze. And so we are continuing to stay in close contact with them to identify if we're going to be able to move those funds forward. If not, we're going to pivot into some frankly pretty novel ideas, whether that be aquaculture, whether that be the opportunity for actual water quality credits that are being generated in a pilot in Charles County. Talbot County is working on one in the commercial space. So I think some really interesting opportunities for private investment to supplant state investment. Turning to the Great Maryland Outdoors Act, there's a couple places in there that have been a real challenge for us, and that is in really getting the critical maintenance fund moving. And when we look at that, one of the biggest struggles we're having is that we continue to accrue critical maintenance issues every year that we're tackling. And so we took a look at the reasons we were kind of slowing down, and we've restructured the agency. We now have a performance review group, a capital review work group that are meeting every 2 weeks to ensure they're moving these projects more quickly. I also wanted to thank the subcommittee and the entirety of the Senate for increasing our critical maintenance cap to 400, which allows us to move more projects internally. And so while the fund number itself is rather low, what it doesn't capture is 26 critical maintenance projects from that list that was part of GMOA. And just to highlight some of the difficulty in spending $70 million in critical maintenance, those 26 projects only cost $3.6 million. So these are a large number of projects that are very small. We're also working to take a regional approach, so we're doing procurement for multiple projects at one time to really try to speed that up. Also wanted to touch just briefly on federal funding on top of NOAA. Fish and Wildlife Service is another big federal funder of ours. We've had conversations with them, again, kind of fits and starts, trying to understand how the user pay, user benefit model federal funds will continue or be amended. That's a major revenue source for the department and helps with managing all of the species that are hunted in the state, as well as our endangered species program. So that is something we are tracking closely and could have potential impacts to our budget in future years. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the subcommittee may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the secretary? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I know we have some public witnesses. We have Ann Jones and Riley Lehman. And then if there's anyone else that had intended to sign up, come on up, Matt. If there's anyone else that intended to sign up that wants to come on up and start in whatever order you want. All right, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee. For the record, my name is Owen Bailey. I'm the co-chair of Partners for Open Space, a statewide coalition with the sole purpose of protecting the formula for the transfer tax. In addition to the letter we submitted, we're here to testify in full support of full funding for the various programs under the transfer tax. Better known as Program Open Space, this initiative is fundamentally about land use, focusing on both protecting and investing in the value that land provides for our state. Whether it be agriculture, forestry, native habitats, historic sites, or park spaces, this land offers tremendous value and returns in the form of food production, economic development, habitat preservation, modernization of historic buildings and properties, and the preservation of our collective history. By protecting and enhancing these land uses, we ensure the realization of their full value. We understand the dire financial position the state is in and the difficult tasks that you have ahead, but we must speak out against the drastic cuts recommended by DLS. Such cuts would devastate the strong partnerships and bring these investments to a halt. The strength of POS is in the consistency of the funding and is in the strong public-private partnership between the state, land trust, and other groups. So with that, we ask that you recommend full funding for the programs under the transfer tax. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ann Jones. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify here today. I do not envy your position. I know that this is a tough budget year, and I know that you are getting questions from a lot of people. My testimony is a little difficult today because the document that you have in front of you and that was online as the capital budget, I was going to support wholeheartedly because it had full funding for the programs that are involved that are funded by the transfer tax, which I know everybody on this committee is well aware of the transfer tax, which is the 0.5% that is a promise to the people of Maryland that it will be used to build parks, open space, preserve agriculture land. Yesterday morning, we found out, I assume you all did too, that there's also a Department of Legislative Services recommendation to entirely cut those programs, not just for this year, but for 26, 27, 28, 29. I noticed in the budget analysis today that we kind of skipped through an awful lot of pages in the document in front of you, which was the pages that involved them. So I very much hope that you will consider not taking those recommendations. I hope that we will be able to address that at some time. That is actually where that is in the operating budget for Department of Natural Resources. So that's where that recommendation showed up, and it was not discussed today. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Just for clarification, it's intentional we didn't discuss it today because this is just the capital budget. We have operating budget subcommittees that meet.
I'm aware, but it's in the legislative analysis for the capital budget.
Got it. Okay.
Those pages were there.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. I am Lucille Walker. I am both the Executive Director of the Southern Maryland National Heritage Area, and we are both a state and national heritage area. I just started.
You're good. You're good.
Oh.
You're good.
No, it's fine. So the Maryland Heritage Area Program, I'm one of the co-chairs for the coalition, touches all aspects of Maryland. There are 13 heritage areas. It touches on every county and Baltimore City. We are funded through Program Open Space. We are not part of the formula. We are a dedicated line within the program. And again, we are here to thank the Moore-Miller administration for full funding in this budget. It shows that the Moore-Miller administration and the General Assembly recognize the powerful economic benefits that come from this program, which is rather unique. Maryland is only one of 2 states in the nation that has a state-based heritage area, and it brings in heritage tourism with cultural tourists and heritage tourists who spend more time and more money. Our return on investment is ridiculously high, $7 for every $1 in state funds. So we are very grateful to the administration for putting us in for full funding. And to Ms. Jones' point, since we are funded through Program Open Space, we are very concerned that we might unintentionally get swept up in this relook and analysis, and that this very vital economic program would no longer be funded. It would end. So we're here to just thank for the current funding and also to support Program Open Space. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee. Matt Stegman from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. It's a pleasure to be here with the subcommittee today. On behalf of CBF, I want to ask for the committee's favorable consideration of the capital budget for DNR as proposed by the governor. The thing that I really wanted to draw the committee's attention to is the continued funding for oyster restoration. This is something that is really important to us at CBF, and oysters are really a powerhouse for improving the water quality of the bay. So we appreciate the department for recognizing that continued investment is necessary, and DLS for agreeing, and just to draw the committee's attention that having consistent, sustained support for oyster restoration is absolutely key to achieve the kind of economy of scale that we need for those oysters to have the maximum impact and to avoid any kind of avoidable costs from mobilizing and demobilizing equipment. So with that, ask for your favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? I don't see any. Thank you. Oh, Senator King has a question.
I just really want to make a statement more than anything. I've sat and listened to everybody today asking, for their full funding, and you all are hearing the same news that we're hearing. And so just understand that we will do the best that we possibly can with what we're left with, but we're really up in the air right now as to where we're going to be. So please understand that we're trying to work with you.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
Are there any other public witnesses that we may have not included? Okay. Mr. Gray. Department of the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll now present the Maryland Department of the Environment, or MDE's fiscal 2026 capital budget analysis. On page 1 there, you see that most of the programs are funded, but there's not any funding for supplemental assistance program, the water supply financial assistance program. That's because there's sufficient money coming in for the water quality revolving loan fund and the drinking water revolving loan fund that can be providing loan forgiveness for those purposes. Moving now to the recommendations on page 2, it's to concur with the governor's allowance and approve all authorizations. Exhibit 1 on page 3 shows the big picture look at MDE's capital programs. Basically, what you're seeing here is the end of the federal fiscal, or the federal funding from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and from
Mr. Gray, can you speak closer into the mic, please?
Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and also the Inflation Reduction Act as well. In terms of the capital changes, that's shown on page 5 in Exhibit 2. You see the main change there is for the Bay Restoration Fund that goes down by around $10 million in special funds. I just highlight a couple of programs here. The first one is the Water Quality Revolving Loan Fund. I'd like to draw your attention to the Exhibit 3 on page 9 that reflects the federal money that's coming in for that program. I'd just like to focus on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act funding for emerging contaminants. There's no money reflected in the fiscal 2026 budget for that purpose, and therefore we've asked on the next page, page 9, for the agency to comment on why a particular project was removed that was supposed to receive that funding for fiscal 2025, why no funding requests were received in fiscal 2026, and in general, why aren't we using that money? And is there a need for it? And is there a reason why, or a way that we can actually get local jurisdictions to be able to use that funding? Next, I'd like to bring your attention to the Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund. Exhibit 4 on page 12 reflects the federal funding once again. I'd like to draw your attention to the IIJA, or Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, led service line funding. So before I get there, we have to go to the comment about the encumbrances at the bottom of page 11. The program, Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund, has had some difficulty in encumbrances recently. It has increased its level in recent years. DLS is recommending that the agency comment on whether those encumbrance levels are expected to continue, and also to talk about whether projects that are being selected are actually ready to proceed. The idea being that if you come in and you're accepted is ready to proceed, you should be able to use that money in a timely fashion. So we'll have that agency comment on that. Then in terms of the funding for the lead service lines noted on page 12, we just don't have as much information, it seems, as we need as a state to understand what our total need is for lead service line replacements. Recent information from Baltimore City and Baltimore County noted a large amount of remaining lines without any information about the material in those lines. And we were expecting to have a complete report in October 2024 reflecting the service lines in Maryland, but that it doesn't, at least in those two jurisdictions, it doesn't look like that funding or that information was provided. So MD should comment on the outcome of that service line survey and talk about kind of whether we'll be able to take full advantage of the federal funding if we don't have that information to support what we're doing. Next, I'd like to draw your attention to the Bay Restoration Fund on page 14. And just a small note on the bottom of page 14 there is some concern about the Bay Restoration Fund in terms of fluctuating revenue reporting. And so MD should comment on the status of efforts to improve the timeliness and the detail of the controller's Bay Restoration Fund revenue reporting that supports that program. Then in terms of the hazardous substance cleanup program, that's reflected on pages 16, 17. And I'll draw your attention to page 18, where there's a project that would actually do an assessment for the Tome School, which is part of the Port of Deposit Historical State Park. However, it appears that there's legislation in this session that would actually take the Tome School out. So the question is that funding needed for that assessment if that's no longer going to be transferred to the Department of Natural Resources for the purposes of that historical park? Unless there are any questions, that concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Gregg? Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, come on up.
Thanks.
I see you got the mayor with you.
I'm going to take advantage of
Absolutely.
introducing
Welcome.
the new crew I have here.
Yeah.
Well, first, good afternoon, Chair and Vice Chair. So good to see you all and members of the committee. I did want to just take a moment to introduce our new federal superstars that are a part of MDE now, who came from US EPA. And we have Adam Ortiz. Most of you probably know Adam. He's the Deputy Secretary for External Affairs. We have Rick Kessler, not Carey. Rick Kessler here. He's the new Land and Materials Director, also again from US EPA. And we have Zach Schaefer from US EPA. He's the new Assistant Secretary for Policy. Just wanted to welcome you all and have you here with me, as well as we have Lee Curry, who's the director. Most of you know Lee. He's the director of our Water and Science Administration. So I'll get started. All right.
I was just saying, you heard me whisper over to the senator. I said, it's wonderful to have just amazing, talented people, but I'm just concerned about all the talent that's leaving the federal government. That's what I reached over. That's what I whispered to her, so just for transparency. But it's great to have, the federal government's loss is our gain, but
That's
still
right.
It's concerning. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. All right, well, I really do thank you for this opportunity to present the fiscal year 2026 capital budget. Again, for the record, I am Serena McElwain, Secretary of Maryland's Department of the Environment. Our budget request is $412 million. It's a slight decrease from this year, but it remains focused on protecting Maryland's water quality, upgrading critical infrastructure, and ensuring resilience against climate-related challenges. As Maryland continue to grow, we must ensure that we have sustainable capital funding sources, which is critical for modernizing infrastructure, maintaining regulatory compliance, and meeting future water resource challenges that are really due to population growth, among other things. Our budget prioritizes drinking water, wastewater upgrades, Chesapeake Bay restoration and flood protection, and climate resilience, with nearly half of it supporting underburdened and underserved communities. Roughly 2/3 of that funding would go to support wastewater infrastructure modernization and expansion, and about 1/3 are investments in drinking water infrastructure to, of course, get the lead out and reduce PFAS and modernize aging systems. Together, these investments will save lives, make our economy stronger, create thousands of good-paying, family-supporting jobs, and build a sustainable Maryland that is resilient to natural disasters. I want to drill in just a little bit deeper on what all of this means in just a few particular areas. We're getting the lead out. Maryland, we are making huge progress in completing the lead service line inventories, which are required by US EPA. Our initial inventory of 1.5 million service line shows that 1 million of them are confirmed to be lead-free. 500,000 of them still need to be assessed, and 3,000 of them need to be replaced. So we're going to leverage the $111 million in federal funds dedicated to replacing lead service lines, and we also anticipate receiving $60 million more. These resources obviously will not get us to the finish line, but this is an enormous down payment to really protecting our children's future, and we are working with local water systems to maximize every single dollar that we have. Second, I want to talk just quickly about investments to protect the Bay. We have made tremendous progress in reducing wastewater pollution. This is in part because of the 2 decades of funding from the Bay Restoration Fund, which is about $2 billion that we've gotten thus far. I think most of us here are aware of the failures at Back River and Patapsco. Those failures really were caused because of aging infrastructure and deferred maintenance. But again, those problems have been fixed, but it is an indication that those failures and the challenges that we have, they're going to remain because we still have older systems across the state. Over the past 20 years, we have upgraded 66 of 67 major plants. I know that is great news. However, those infrastructure and those plants that we have upgraded, they will still need to be upgraded again as they age. And so that's why we have to make sure that we're planning for all future investments. I just want to make a point that in terms of the Bay Restoration Fund, in 2030, the fund will be cut in half. And this is an early conversation, but we do need, the funding that's coming from the Bay Restoration Fund so that we can continue to fund the wastewater treatment, upgrades, septic conversions, stormwater projects, and much more. And we can talk about that at another time, but it is important that I bring that up. I'll talk very quickly about PFAS, which is often called forever chemicals because they are around forever. I just want to brag a bit about Maryland. We are a national leader when it comes to addressing those contaminants, which we know cause heart attacks, cancer, and developmental problems in children and in pregnant women as well. We're also making sure that drinking water systems meet the new federal limits. We have secured $125 million in federal funds for water systems, particularly for those that are at the most risk. Additionally, I just wanted to make this point as well. There were no local jurisdictions who applied for the IIJA funding for PFAS projects this year. And it was not because they didn't need the funding. I think it was more because those wastewater plants, they need to understand a little more about PFAS. They need to evaluate it and understand the data. But we are proactively working with local jurisdictions so that we can prepare them and help them when this funding is available again in the future. And I just want to quickly mention our flood mitigation program. We're expanding Maryland's flood mitigation program. There is $14 million allocated for fiscal year 2026, and that funding is going to projects in Baltimore City, Somerset, Allegheny counties, just to name a few, to deal with flooding issues. And as I conclude, I just want to underscore that while these programs and dollar figures may seem a bit ambiguous, we are talking about real dollars and going to actually real communities throughout the state. It's never been about funding for MDE. The funding is for you, for your constituents, for your communities. We're using the capital budget to invest in projects. Recently, we invested over $200 million in a WSSC project that converts waste to energy. Very innovative project. In fact, that project, they're going to be able to fuel buses in Montgomery County, like hundreds of buses. So that's a good project. I also want to just mention that we put $56 million in drinking water upgrades in Prince George's County and another $50 million into sewer and non-point source projects in not only Prince George's County, but also in Montgomery County. And that concludes my my talking points for today. I am here to answer any questions that you may have.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Secretary. Any questions for the agency? All right, well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Colleagues, we'll now turn our attention to the Department of Juvenile Services. Ms. Miller. Oh, actually, before that, is there anyone that was signed up to testify publicly that we may have missed because of the computer error? Okay. Ms. Miller.
Good afternoon, Chair Zucker and committee. My name is Madeline Miller, and today I'll be presenting the DLS analysis of the DJS capital budget. The DJS capital program is most often used to address the facilities in which youth live. The performance measures section of this analysis will discuss the department's secure detention and secure committed populations. The detained average daily population, or ADP, consists of three populations: the secured detention predisposition population, the secured pending placement population, and the adult court authorized detention population, or adult court population. Since overall complaints rose approximately 75% between fiscal 1 and fiscal 2023, and the courts have been fully operational post-pandemic, the detained ADP rose to 264 youth in fiscal 24, as seen in Exhibit 1 on page 4 of the document. The average daily population is expected to decrease slightly in fiscal 25 to 261 youths, as fewer complaints receive formal case dispositions. The overall ADP in fiscal 24 and 25 is higher than in fiscal 20, but lower than in fiscal 2019, the last year of data not impacted by the pandemic. Based on fiscal 2025 year-to-date data, the adult court population now accounts for approximately 62% of the detained population, the highest proportion since DJS assumed responsibility in fiscal 2014. Exhibit 2 on page 5 compares the rated capacity of DJS's detention facilities to its fiscal 2024 ADP. Overall, the fiscal 2024 detention average daily population of 264 is 42 youths below the department's rated capacity of 306 youths at the start of fiscal 24. The department's detention facilities operated at a capacity ranging from 77.1% at BCJJC, the Baltimore City Juvenile Justice Center, to 96.1% at the Western Maryland Children's Center, or WMCC. WMCC became a girls-only facility in October of 2023. Up to 6 female youth may also be placed at the Lower Eastern Shore Children's Center. Remaining detention bed capacity is designated for male youth. I'll now turn to a discussion of the committed populations. Since fiscal 2023, the most commonly used post-court treatment program for DJS youth was a state-operated placement, though DJS may also contract with private in-state and out-of-state vendors to provide services. Exhibit 3 on page 6 shows the committed residential average daily population for each of the possible committed placements. The committed population rose by 11.2% in fiscal 24, with almost all of the growth coming from placements in state-operated facilities. Per diem placements are those operated by private providers. Since fiscal 2015, the private per diem ADP has fallen by approximately 78%. The out-of-state average daily population decreased by 3.2 youths, or approximately 28% from fiscal 23 to 24. State-operated placements saw a 16.7% increase in fiscal 24, with the average daily population of youths rising from 67 to 78. Even as the average daily population rises to 84 in fiscal 25 year-to-date data, the utilization of state-operated placements remains 29.7% lower than it was in fiscal 2019. A comparison of the total space and the average daily population usage is provided in Exhibit 4 on page 7. DJS has fewer youth in committed treatment centers now, but fewer treatment centers are open than were in fiscal 2019. The first and only issue begins on page 8 and relates to the department's recently submitted facilities master plan. This document contains information about the current and planned capacity of DJS residential programs, a funding proposal for the Maryland Youth Residence Center, which would increase the hardware secure committed treatment space, institutional data about the building and sites managed by the department, and inventory information. Though the department only has one capital project in its budget this year, the operating budget will be used to support its facility needs. The department plans to use its current and future operating budgets to fund projects like HVACs, a roof, chiller, generators, a boiler, a gatehouse, master control room, additional generators, educational trailers, and to extend fencing at facilities like Backbone Mountain Youth Center, BCJJC, the Charles H. Hickey School, Victor Cullen Center, and at WMCC. The department also plans to use its operating budget funds to support certain technological costs. DJS should comment on what planned projects in the facilities master plan may be eligible for DGS's facility renewal program. Facility utilization rates for the detained and committed populations are shown in Exhibit 5 on page 9. In the facilities master plan, DJS projects that its current detention capacity for male youth and female youth will remain adequate over the next decade due to the overall decline in juvenile crime, the use of detention alternatives in the department's other work. The fiscal 2024 detained youth average daily population represented an 86.3% of the total bed space within the detention facilities. Committed treatment space was similarly utilized with a utilization rate of 86%. In fiscal 25 year-to-date data, however, that increases to approximately 93%. In the facilities master plan, the department projects that its current committed treatment capacity of 85 beds for male use and 6 beds for female use is inadequate, and that the MYRC project should be added to increase the total committed capacity for male youth. The available capacities within detention and committed treatment facilities are connected through the population of youth that is in detention, post-adjudication, and pending placement to an out-of-home treatment program. Previously, youth in this status were not able to receive treatment and had to wait until they had been placed before they could make progress on certain components of their treatment service plans. Due to the overall lower average daily population of youths in detention, DJS opened pending placement units at BCJJC and one at CYDC, the Cheltenham Youth Detention Center. The department reports that the units have maintained an average daily population of approximately 24 youths since opening in July 2023. DJS reports that approximately 80% of the youths who've participated in the units since then were waiting for a placement to a DJS treatment facility. Some youth may be kept pending placement due to recent facility closures by DJS, some of which may be temporary and some of which are permanent. The facilities master plan describes 3 properties as temporarily closed: the Alfred D. Noyes Children's Center, the Garrett Children's Center, and the Meadow Mountain Youth Center. Noyes was a detention center with the ability to serve male and female youth. The Garrett Children's Center was a staff-secure committed treatment facility for male youth, and the MMYC also provided staff-secure committed treatment beds for male youth. In its testimony, DJS should comment on why the use of pending placement units at detention facilities is preferable to reopening temporarily closed staff-secure treatment centers. Though temporarily closed facilities could be reopened, DJS has also permanently closed 5 facilities since May 2016, as shown in Exhibit 6. These facilities offered 42 detention beds, 31 staff-secure committed beds, and 14 hardware-secure committed beds. The facilities master plan also includes information about recent and planned initiatives, including the launch of the Youth Opportunities Learning Occupations Academy, or YOLO Academy. The department will develop this as a residential treatment program focused on the workforce development and employment opportunities for its youth. The planned launch date of this program is in January 2026. DJS should comment on how many youth the YOLO Academy will serve and whether it will be available for male and/or female youth. The allowance includes funding for 1 project, the Maryland Youth Residence Center renovation and expansion. This project will renovate a facility in Baltimore City and add a 2-story addition to create a 24-bed hardware-secure treatment facility for male youth. Last year, the legislature authorized $1.43 million in design funds for this purpose, and the current request is for $1.15 million to continue design. The total project cost is now estimated at $49.7 million, approximately 7.7% higher than was planned under the 2024 CIP. This project would expand the statewide committed treatment capacity from 91 beds to 115. It would be the only committed treatment facility located in Baltimore City. Other facilities for male youth are located in Allegheny, Frederick, and Garrett counties. The project received Part 1 and Part 2 program approval from DBM on December 20th, 2024. DJS should update the committees on the progress that has been made to procure the project's architect. Returning to page 2 of the analysis, I'll also note that the allowance includes a $1.5 million deauthorization associated with the Cheltenham Youth Treatment Center project. This project has been canceled. DLS recommends approving the $1.15 million authorization and the deauthorization for the Department of Juvenile Services. I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Well, thank you very much for that analysis. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Mr. Secretary, thank you for your patience. Appreciate it. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'll wait till everybody sits down.
Good afternoon.
Thanks. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Zucker, Vice Chair McCray, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Vinnie Schiraldi, Secretary of the Department of Juvenile Services. At the table with me are Colette Coleman-Price, Director of Capital Planning, Design and Leasing, and Kara Annenson, Director of Legislation, Policy and Reform. I want to thank Ms. Miller for her thoughtful analysis and our continued partnership, as well as DBM analyst Dan Lee. We have 1 capital project, the Maryland Youth Residence Center, and we're urging you to support continued funding of $1.15 million. We were asked to comment on 4 issues for this analysis. First, on page 8, regarding the facility renewal program, we were asked to comment on which planned projects in the facilities master plan may be eligible for the Department of General Services facility renewal program. The projects that are eligible for DGSs, I'm going to put emphasis on the G and the J, DGS's facility renewal program will be submitted through the project justification, preventative maintenance operation package submission process, which is due mid-March 2025. Our department's been working diligently to conduct a thorough review of all prior pending and current DGS level and PMO facility-related projects while maintaining ongoing open communications with DGS to determine the best path forward. Additionally, we're focused on aligning with the new facilities master plan and fostering a transparent approach to these efforts. Next, on page 11, we were asked to explain why using pendant placement units in detention facilities is preferable to reopening temporarily closed staff secure treatment centers. Our response is that we establish pending placement units within detention facilities to address the challenges faced by youth waiting for an available treatment bed. While in a pending placement unit, youth immediately receive evidence-based treatment services that count towards their treatment plan, which for kids serving detention time prior to going to a treatment program, unlike adults, that time doesn't count towards their ultimate release date. So in pending placement, they receive those treatment hours just as they would if they were in their residential facility. This not only gets services to young people much sooner, but it prevents them from becoming frustrated because they're doing that dead time I just described, which doesn't count towards their release date. Services include individual sessions focused on treatment readiness and family therapy, ensuring that youth make meaningful progress while awaiting placement. Since launching the pending placement units, the number of weekly treatment hours for youth has consistently increased. Since these youth were already in detention, utilizing existing space for treatment was both a practical and efficient solution. It bears remembering that reopening a temporarily closed facility would require significant resources, including staff for residential care, behavioral health, medical, food service, and maintenance. For example, we need about 141 staff to operate a 25-bed facility. This does not include educational services such as teachers and a principal. These operational costs make reopening facilities far more expensive than leveraging existing detention center space. Next, on page 12, we were asked how many youth the YOLO Academy will serve and whether it will be available for male and/or female youth. We're still in the planning stages for the YOLO Academy, which is essentially going to be a vocational specific academy for kids who have completed their high school degree or have gotten a GED or on a GED track. However, our current projections indicate we expect to serve 20 male youth. Finally, on page 14, we were asked to provide an update on the progress that's been made to procure the MYRC project's architect. We've been working with DGS, and they have now submitted to their procurement division all documentation required to procure the architectural professional services that occurred last week, the week of February 10th. The DGS project manager is waiting on their procurement division to advise that all documents have been uploaded to Emma for the architectural solicitation. We expect that to happen very soon. Happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary and your team. Any questions for the Secretary? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you now.
Enjoy the rest of your evening. Mr. Quist, last but certainly not least, Maryland Environmental Service.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Good evening. The Maryland Environmental Service capital budget includes funding for the State Water and Sewer Infrastructure Improvement Fund. This fund provides support for improvements at state-owned water and wastewater treatment facilities. The fiscal 26 budget includes $2.6 million in GO bond funds for 2 projects at state-owned facilities, as well as $5.6 million in non-budgeted funds for DNR projects at state parks facilities. The project descriptions are on page 3 through 6 of the analysis. Starting with the 2 projects funded through GO bond funds. The first is the Charlotte Hall Veterans Home Water Treatment Program, Water Treatment Plant project. This project previously received funding for design in fiscal 23. At that time, it was anticipated that construction would occur in fiscal 24. However, due to some delays in the design phase for the project, the construction is now planned for fiscal 26 and is now appearing in this year's capital budget request. There is a pre-authorization for fiscal 27 for this project included in the budget bill. However, MES and the Department of Veterans and Military Families are working on submitting a federal grant application to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. If successful, that federal grant would offset the need for some of the additional federal funding. It's anticipated that there would be a notification of a potential federal award later on in calendar 25 for that project. The other project that is funded through GEO bond funding is the Maryland Correctional Institution wastewater treatment plant project. This project is a newly funded project and would receive initial funding for beginning design in fiscal 2026. And then the four projects at DNR facilities that are included in non-budgeted funds include the Point Lookout State Park power distribution improvements, the Point Lookout State Park wastewater treatment plant upgrade project, the Fort Frederick State Park water distribution system upgrade project, and the Janes Island State Park water main extension and power distribution improvements project. On page 7 of the analysis is also discussed that there are 5 other projects that were initially planned to be included in the fiscal 26 request. However, for various reasons, those are being deferred until later on. The analysis also notes a couple of things about the encumbrance and expenditure of previously authorized funds and the use of contingency funds. Just noting that there are $39.5 million in previously authorized program funds that at this time are yet to be encumbered. And then for contingency funds, the projects in this year's capital budget have budgeted contingencies of 15 to 20%, which is slightly higher than contingency percentages for other projects in the capital budget. And that's simply because these are some projects that have complexities that are greater than other areas. So they want to make sure that those percentages are high enough to account for those. Lastly, the DLS recommendation is to approve the GEO bond authorization and pre-authorizations. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quist. Any questions for this great analyst? All right, seeing none, come on up, pull up the agency. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Chair Zucker. For the record, my name is Dr. Charles Glass. I'm the Executive Director of MES, and with me is Deputy Director Freketic. First, on behalf of MES, we would like to thank Mr. Quist and the entire DLS team for their thorough analysis both on both our operating and capital budgets. You have our written testimony, which urges adoption of the capital requests. And as you heard the DLS presentation, DLS concurs with our approach. With respect to the project contingency funds, we just want to stress that we are not seeking any increases at this time. Increasing the fund levels is overdue, but we're not increasing any contribution to those funds at this point in time. We will work with a DBM to approach this in the future. Further increases are needed because of inflation and critical emergency infrastructure upgrades at facilities. But again, cost will not be increased at this time. Costs have increased, but we're not going to increase the funding for those. That concludes our report, except for I'd like to ask if I could add a couple of things just for the community's knowledge. Our vacancy rate is currently at 3.2%. That's below 5%. That doesn't have anything to do with federal employees at this point in time. We instituted a summer internship program that's going into its third year, and have gotten great young folks to onboard to our organization. And we've also launched a 2-year program for a rotational fellowship like other large organizations have, where people learn different parts of the organization before they start a role. And we've had a couple of hundred applicants for 2 positions, for the engineer and the environmental specialist in that role. Our MBE numbers in 2024, if you don't know, we hit 33% attainment, and which obviously exceeds the state goal. And I'm proud to say that we were named again top workplaces in both the Baltimore Sun, Washington Post, and USA Today. So that concludes our comments. All thanks to the 800 staff at MES that do their job every day. And with that, we'll take any questions.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to adjourn in a second. Mr. Quist mentioned federal grant that you guys are going after. Is that in the mix there?
I believe the Veteran Affairs grant is still in the mix. We have
Okay.
lost grants that were associated with environmental justice and other.
Do you all expect federal grants to, like, do you think federal grants are going to be available?
That particular one, possibly.
Possibly, don't know.
We don't know.
I think it's a kind of a crapshoot at this point.
Got it. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for your service. See any other questions? Committee, that ends today's capital budget subcommittee hearings.
Are we going to try to hire anyone? We try to fill all positions. Our positions are billable, so we already have contracts for those roles. So when we're embedded with the counties, we're embedded with the state. So they're for roles that are already in contract.
If we get more projects and we don't have the staffing for it, then we hire.
Here we are in this tight budget times. I mean, we adjourn. This is off record. I don't want to keep everybody going.
You want?
I'm good. Mr. Chair, I'm good.